Hi everyone! Today I want to talk about how to prepare you for your individual response in paper 4. As we all know, individual response happens after your 8-minute group interaction. Some of you might feel a great relief since you've just managed discussing for 8 minutes. A larger part of the assessment is over. Or some of you might actually feel more stressed because of the individual response that's coming up. No matter which type of candidate you are, there are ways to tackle this part B. Today's sharing will be based on what I have observed from your previous lesson. After our group discussion that day, I asked each one of you a question in part B. Some of you began your response by saying, "Thank you for your question." And before you end your response, you tend to say, "This is the end of my sharing," or "This is the end of my presentation." Actually, according to the Examination and Assessment Authority, these expressions are what they called formulaic expressions, sometimes even described as wasted time. So candidates are encouraged to focus on a main idea, and on top of that, draw on your own experience and creativity to form a response. Now, if the question is a yes or no question, candidates should respond directly with a yes or no, and then go on to elaborate further. If your response is a bit too short, then chances are the examiners will consider that as incomprehensive response. So remember, do not use these default formulated expressions. Instead, start responding right away. But sometimes I know you might need 1 or 2 seconds to think exactly what to respond. In that case, instead of saying, "Thank you for your question," I like to advise my students to try and paraphrase the question asked. For example, if the question is, "Why do students cheat in schools?" you could buy yourself 1 or 2 seconds by rephrasing the question like this. Exploring the reasons why students cheat in schools is not as simple as one might think. There are internal and external factors contributing to this phenomenon. You see how I try to paraphrase the question asked a little bit to buy me that extra 1 or 2 seconds before I dig into the main content of the question. Also, I like to advise my students to consciously divide your 1 minute into 2 parts. So 30 seconds for each part. Take the previous question as an example. You can use roughly 30 seconds to talk about the internal factors, why students cheat in school. When you see the 30 seconds left on a timer, you can then move on to talk about the external factors. And when you see around 10 seconds left, this is when you can sum up. Of course, all these come with a lot and lots of practice. And reading extensively is your first step to get yourself a wider knowledge base so that whatever question is asked, you will certainly have something to talk about. For those of you who have experienced Part B will know this. 1 minute actually feels a lot longer than you think, especially when you don't have much idea to share, right? One of the main areas to assess speaking is actually the interaction skills. From hearing the question to your body language, your facial expression, content of the response, they're all observed by the examiners. In other words, using up 1 whole minute doesn't necessarily mean it's a perfect response. The report from the Examination Authority actually said, candidates are not expected to fill up every second of the allocated 1 minute. It is much better to give a relevant and spontaneous response which answers the question in a thoughtful manner, instead of one that lasts for exactly 1 minute but does not display any of these qualities. Another phenomenon in Part B is that candidates have 1 chance to ask for a different question, and you are allowed to ask for another question after the first question is asked. However, now you need to remember, you only have 1 chance. And if you give up the first question, then whichever question you get next, you will have to answer it. In other words, you cannot go back to the previous question. The problem observed, according to the Examination Authority, is that some weaker candidates employed an apparently pre-planned strategy to ask for another question if they had somehow felt the initial question to be unsatisfactory in some way. Observations reported also include the fact that some candidates requested another question without even giving much thought. So, my overall recommendation is always try your best to come up with a response. Show the examiners that you really are trying to think, that you've taken the initiative to elaborate on the response. And one more thing, once the timers has started, requesting for a new question will not give you extra time to respond. Therefore, you have to make good use of the remaining time to speak as much as you can to give a complete response. Okay? All right, that's it for today. Feel free to leave me any comments in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to answer any queries. Until next time, bye-bye.